Imagine drifting with me on a slow cruise along the wide edge of a glowing nebula from beginning to end. You feel a soft, steady hum from the ship around you and a light vibration through your seat as we move forward. Outside your window, clouds of gas and dust spread out like mist, lit gently by nearby stars. You notice how light fades and brightens across the clouds, and how dark space rests quietly beyond them. Shapes form and fade as we pass, showing where stars are born over very long periods of time. Watch how colors change from soft pinks to pale blues, and feel the calm inside the ship as you take it all in. Everything you are seeing comes from real space images and science, even if your mind needs time to accept the scale. Before we continue, remember that simple support, like a like or subscribe, helps this work continue, and it truly matters. Now, take a moment, close your eyes, prepare for sleep, and feel everything around you. Let the cruise continue gently in your thoughts as you drift beside the nebula in silence. You settle into your seat as the shuttle hums softly beneath you. The vibrations are almost imperceptible, but you feel them through the soles of your feet, through the palms of your hands resting on the armrests. The cabin is quiet, almost reverently still, save for the occasional mechanical sigh as the life support system adjusts. Outside the thick glass of your viewport, the blackness of space stretches infinitely, dotted with distant stars that shimmer faintly, each one a sun light years away. You take a deep breath and notice the air moving gently around you, recycled and filtered, carrying a sterile scent that reminds you that life is still carefully preserved in this small human bubble. The shuttle begins a gentle turn, and you see the first hint of color along the horizon. A soft glow, pale and diffuse, seems to hover against the darkness, like the faint edges of a cloud lit by a distant sun. Your eyes track it as you lean slightly forward, and the glow grows brighter, more defined. You feel the shuttle's tiny thrusters fire, just enough to adjust your angle, and your body shifts slightly in response, pressing lightly against the seat harness. You notice how perfectly weightless you are, how even the smallest motion carries you with it, floating ever so slowly toward the nebula's edge. As you move closer, the glow transforms. You see tendrils of light stretching outward, pale blues and soft reds weaving together. These are not colors in the way your eyes see a rainbow on Earth. They are light emitted by hydrogen and helium, excited by distant stars, and yet you perceive them as gentle ribbons, delicate and luminous. You can almost feel the energy radiating from them, though of course it is safe. The radiation is measured, monitored, contained within these vast stretches of gas. You watch as some areas are brighter than others. The denser patches glimmer faintly, hinting at the immense pressure building quietly within them. Regions where gravity is pulling the gas together, preparing to form new stars over thousands of years. Your gaze moves beyond the glowing edge, and you notice the stars behind it. They twinkle faintly through the nebula's mist, their light scattered and diffused by tiny particles of dust suspended in the gas. You see how the nebula does not block them completely, but softens their glare, giving the background stars a gentle halo. You reach out, as if to touch them, and feel the slight pull of curiosity in your chest. Space has no up or down here, but your senses anchor you to the shuttle, to the hum and vibration, and to the view that stretches out before you, vast and unbroken. You follow a particular streak of color that twists like smoke in slow motion. It is pale pink at the core, fading into soft violet along the edges. This is the signature of ionized hydrogen, the H-alpha emission that glows when hydrogen atoms recombine after being split by energetic light from nearby stars. You lean closer to the window, pressing your forehead gently against the cool glass, feeling the faint chill transfer through it. The streak seems alive, though you know it is simply energy moving through space, waves of light that began millions of years ago. You marvel at how slowly the nebula moves, almost imperceptibly, yet knowing that even this quiet drift is a vast motion of gas and dust on a scale that dwarfs your imagination. The shuttle adjusts its path, tilting slightly to give you a broader view. You feel the controls respond under your fingers as if you are part of the vessel. Though you know the navigation is carefully automated, you track along a faint glowing arc, noticing that some regions are denser, some almost transparent. The contrast reveals the nebula's structure, knots where gravity is beginning to gather material, filaments stretching tens of light years, and cavities cleared by the winds of young, energetic stars. You imagine the forces at play here: gravity pulling, radiation pushing, particles colliding and scattering in silent, endless dances. A faint hum reaches your ears, the shuttle's systems compensating for minor shifts in orientation. Outside, the nebula stretches like a curtain of color, a vast tapestry of matter glowing softly. You notice how the edges of the cloud blur into the darkness, diffuse yet vivid, creating a gradient from deep black to faint purple, then pale pink, then almost white in the brightest knots. You watch as light from distant stars penetrates these clouds, scattering along the dusk grains, illuminating some regions while leaving others in shadow. The shadows are deep, almost tactile, and you feel a quiet thrill tracing the contours of the nebula with your eyes. You reach out and imagine feeling the gases brushing past you. Of course, you are safe inside the shuttle, but your mind traces the currents of hydrogen and helium, imagining the gentle flows, the eddies created as stellar winds ripple through the cloud. Some areas shimmer slightly, revealing subtle movement. You notice the interplay of light and motion, the nebula alive in its own cosmic rhythm. Tiny bursts of ultraviolet light from newborn stars flicker faintly, invisible to the eye but registered by the sensors that overlay color onto your view. You follow a bright patch that seems almost solid, knowing it is merely dense gas, thousands of times larger than the solar system, moving slowly under the influence of gravity. The shuttle drifts gently closer to one of the nebula's brighter regions. You lean into the harness, feeling the subtle tug of acceleration. The edges of the cloud become sharper, yet still soft and ethereal. You see filaments wrapping around dark cavities, trails of dust marking where light cannot reach. You notice how the nebula is not uniform. It is a complex structure, shaped over millions of years by the interplay of matter and energy. You track along a twisting ribbon, noting tiny variations in color, as if the gas itself were breathing slowly, expanding and contracting on a cosmic scale. As you float along the shuttle's path, your eyes move from the colorful gas to the stars beyond. You see clusters forming, faint pinpoints of light emerging from within the nebula's folds. Some are young, hot stars, shining brightly in blue and white. Others are cooler, dimmer, reddish stars, still forming in the shadows. You trace their positions, realizing that this region is both nursery and graveyard. Stars are born here, and over millions of years, some will die and return their matter to the cloud, continuing the endless cycle. You feel a profound sense of scale, understanding that what you see stretches far beyond your comprehension, yet is here in front of you, tangible through the mind's eye and the senses guided by the shuttle's instruments. The glow of the nebula intensifies slightly as you drift along. You notice subtle waves moving through the gas, evidence of shock fronts from nearby supernovae or powerful stellar winds. You watch how these waves push material, creating dense knots and empty cavities. You can imagine reaching out and feeling the gentle pressure, though it is only a visualization, your mind translating the invisible forces into sensation. The motion is slow, almost imperceptible, yet it carries energy beyond anything on Earth. Energy that lights up entire regions of space for millions of years. Your attention is drawn to a particularly bright clump within the cloud. The hydrogen glows intensely, surrounded by wisps of dust that curve gracefully around it. This is a region of active star formation. You notice the faint outline of protostars embedded in the gas, barely visible as faint points of light, gathering mass, heating up, preparing to ignite nuclear fusion. You observe how gravity sculpts the surrounding material, drawing it inward in slow spirals. You follow the curves with your eyes, tracing the invisible flow of energy and matter, feeling almost as if you could step into the cloud and drift alongside these forming stars. The shuttle continues its gentle glide, and you feel the vast emptiness of space around you. There is no sound here, yet the silence is complete, profound. Your eyes sweep across the nebula, taking in the complexity of its colors, the layering of gas, the interplay of light and shadow. You notice the smallest variations, subtle differences in hue that hint at temperature changes, chemical composition, and density. You feel a deep connection, an awareness that you are witnessing processes that will continue long after your journey ends, processes that shape the very elements that make up your body. As you drift further, the nebula begins to stretch along your field of vision. You see the edges unfurling slowly, tendrils reaching outward, curling into the darkness. You watch how the light fades gradually into space, how the glowing gas becomes thinner, more transparent, until it merges with the black void. You feel the shuttle adjusting to your path, keeping you aligned with the wisps of color, so you can trace their contours, follow their motion, and sense the structure of the nebula as if you are moving alongside it in slow, deliberate time. You notice the faint blue tinge of ionized oxygen at the edges of the cloud, a cool glow contrasting with the warmer pink of hydrogen. You lean closer to the viewport, feeling the cold glass against your forehead, imagining the vast distances involved. These small patches of color indicate regions where energetic photons strip electrons from oxygen atoms, creating the soft glow. You follow the patterns, tracing ribbons of blue that twist around brighter areas, appreciating how the nebula is not a single mass, but a complex network of clouds, waves, and filaments. The stars beyond the nebula flicker faintly through the haze. Some shine steadily, others pulse slightly. Distant variable stars marking time on scales incomprehensible to the human eye. You watch the patterns, noting how they contrast with the diffuse glowing gas of the nebula. You feel the shuttle drift gently forward, carrying you along the edge, and your senses absorb the quiet majesty of it all. The hum of engines, the coolness of the cabin, the gentle pull of gravity simulated through your harness, all combine with the visual spectacle outside to create a sense of presence that is both calm and profound. You take a moment to follow a particular filament twisting along the nebula's edge. Its motion is slow, almost imperceptible, yet you can see tiny changes in brightness along its length. These are caused by density variations and local ionization fronts. You follow it with your eyes, tracing its subtle curves, noting how it weaves through darker regions and around bright knots. You imagine the forces shaping it, the gravity, radiation pressure, and collisions of tiny particles, all unfolding over millions of years, yet visible to you in a single, slow-moving panorama. The shuttle continues to drift along the edge. You notice the interplay of light and shadow as the nebula folds in on itself. Some areas glow brightly, while others are almost completely dark, opaque clouds blocking the light from stars behind them. You trace the dark lanes with your eyes, following the paths where dust is densest. You feel the contrast in your mind: bright hydrogen, faint oxygen, shadow dust, all combining to create a three-dimensional tapestry, an active environment of birth and change. Outside, the nebula begins to widen in your view. You see overlapping layers of gas, filaments, and knots. Some tendrils stretch far, reaching out into empty space. Others curl inward, forming pockets of higher density where stars may yet form. You follow each one with your eyes, feeling the slow, silent rhythm of the nebula. You notice how the color changes with density. Denser regions appear more red, less dense regions more faint and blue. You feel a quiet awe at the scale, knowing that each stretch of gas you see may span tens of light years, a distance impossible to grasp but tangible through your vision. The shuttle hums steadily, carrying you along a gentle arc. You notice tiny specks moving within the nebula. They are small clumps of dust and gas, drifting slowly, pushed by radiation and winds from nearby stars. You follow one as it glides along the edge, seeing how it interacts with the surrounding gas. You imagine its journey, millions of years in the making, and feel a deep connection to the processes unfolding before you. Each particle, each wisp of gas, is part of a grand cosmic rhythm that you are privileged to witness in real time. You watch the nebula stretch farther, its edges becoming more complex, more intricate. Faint, twisting ribbons of gas wrap around brighter knots. Darker filaments thread between the clouds. You trace the patterns, following the subtle curves, appreciating how light and matter dance together. You feel as if you are floating alongside the nebula, part of its slow, deliberate motion, guided by the gentle nudges of the shuttle's thrusters. The hum, the vibrations, the view, and the calm of space combine to immerse you fully in this edge of a stellar nursery. The shuttle drifts forward, and you feel the subtle shift as you cross the threshold into the nebula's outer edge. You notice immediately that the blackness of space begins to soften, replaced by faint clouds that curl and stretch before your eyes. Wisps of gas seem to float past the viewport, delicate and pale, drifting slowly as though caught in an invisible current. You lean closer to the glass, letting your eyes follow the faint tendrils, noticing how they twist around each other, overlapping in patterns that are both chaotic and beautiful. Your hands rest lightly on the armrests, and you feel the gentle vibration of the engines beneath you, steady and reassuring, as if they are guiding you along this quiet, cosmic river. Look closely, and you can see variations in color and brightness. Some regions glow softly pink, others pale blue, and a few faint greenish streaks catch your attention at the edges. The colors are subtle, almost ethereal, yet they tell a story about the composition of the gas around you. Hydrogen, the most common element, dominates the pink areas. You can imagine the hydrogen atoms absorbing energy from distant stars, then releasing it as light, creating the soft glow you see. In the blue regions, oxygen atoms emit light as well, ionized by the energy of nearby hot stars. You notice how the color shifts gradually, blending into each other. showing you the slow variations in density and temperature within this immense cloud. You watch as the wisps of gas drift lazily across your view. Some regions are thin, almost transparent, letting background stars shine faintly through them. Others are thicker, blocking the stars completely, forming subtle shadows that twist and curl like smoke in a soft breeze. You trace these dark shapes with your eyes, following their slow, deliberate paths. You feel the motion, even though you are perfectly still inside the shuttle. It is as if the gas brushes past your mind, tracing gentle paths along the contours of your awareness. The stars beyond the nebula flicker faintly through the translucent gas. Their light bends and scatters, creating tiny halos and soft glows around each point. You notice how some stars shine steadily, while others pulse faintly, as though breathing with the nebula itself. You reach out in your mind, tracing their positions, imagining the immense distances that separate you. Each light year stretches incomprehensibly far, yet the stars appear so close in your view, embedded within this delicate cloud. The contrast between dark lanes and glowing gas makes the depth of the nebula almost tangible. You move your eyes along a bright streak of hydrogen gas. Its edges fade slowly into the surrounding darkness, giving it a soft, almost liquid look. You notice subtle swirls, small curls of gas rotating as if stirred by some invisible hand. These motions are real, slow movements caused by the combined effect of gravity, stellar winds, and magnetic fields. You imagine the particles colliding, scattering, and drifting, all moving silently through the void. Each tiny motion is part of a vast, ongoing process that shapes the structure of the nebula. Some patches of gas glow faintly more than others. You see bright knots surrounded by softer halos. These are denser regions, where gravity has begun to gather matter together. You follow the shape of one knot, tracing its outline against the fainter gas around it. You imagine the hydrogen and helium atoms, tiny and invisible, moving toward each other, slowly building the mass that may one day form a new star. You feel a quiet awe, sensing the enormous timescales involved, processes unfolding over millions of years, yet visible to you in this moment through the soft glow of light. As you drift deeper into the nebula's edge, you notice a subtle gradient in the density of the gas. The outermost layers are thin, almost transparent, while regions closer to the center of the cloud grow denser and brighter. You watch how light interacts with this material. Some wavelengths pass easily, letting starlight shine through. Others are absorbed or scattered, creating delicate patterns of color and shadow. You follow a faint blue filament twisting through the pink hydrogen gas, watching how it curves gently around darker lanes. Your eyes move slowly, tracing each bend and curl, absorbing the structure without hurry. You feel the shuttle adjust slightly, its orientation changing as it glides along your chosen path. The movement is so subtle you only notice the tilt through your body, a gentle shift in your harness, as if the shuttle itself is breathing along with the nebula. Outside, the gas flows past like a slow, living stream. You notice the faintest hints of turbulence, areas where the gas seems to swirl more energetically. These are regions shaped by radiation from stars already formed inside the nebula. You imagine the energy pushing the particles, creating small waves and ripples that travel outward, invisible yet perceptible through the patterns of light you see. The stars behind the nebula twinkle faintly through the translucent gas. Their light bends slightly as it passes through varying densities, creating subtle halos and ghostly lines. You follow one small cluster, noticing how the starlight illuminates nearby filaments, revealing texture and depth you could not perceive in darkness. You reach out with your mind, tracing the path of the light as it moves through the gas, imagining how hydrogen and helium atoms absorb some energy and release it again. The process is continuous, silent, and perfectly balanced, yet it creates the gentle glow that fills your vision. You watch the nebula expand along your viewport. Its edge is not a straight line, but a shifting boundary of color and shadow, soft and irregular. You notice thin, twisting filaments moving slowly outward, some curling back inward, forming loops and arcs. The motion is subtle, almost imperceptible, yet you can see the effect over the wide field of view. You follow a single filament for several minutes, tracing its delicate curves, watching how light and shadow play along its length. You feel a deep sense of connection, as though you are floating with the nebula itself, a silent witness to the slow unfolding of cosmic processes. Some regions glow faintly more brightly than others. You notice the brightest patches correspond to areas where the hydrogen density is highest, or where young stars emit energy that excites the surrounding gas. You see tiny specks of dust scattering light, creating soft halos that shimmer faintly. You imagine how each tiny particle contributes to the overall structure, how collisions and interactions shape the cloud over millennia. You follow these particles visually, watching their slow drift, tracing patterns that repeat on vast scales, patterns that are invisible on Earth, but revealed here in the nebula's quiet glow. You lean slightly forward, pressing your forehead against the cool glass. The nebula stretches before you, a living wall of color and light. You watch how faint ribbons of gas diffuse slowly into the blackness of space. Some tendrils fade gently, almost dissolving, while others remain dense, curling around themselves in intricate patterns. You feel the scale pressing against your imagination. Light years of gas, drifting, moving, forming the seeds of stars. You sense the quiet rhythm, the gentle pulse of energy and matter, unfolding in slow, deliberate motion that you can almost track with your eyes. You notice subtle variations in color across the edge of the nebula. Pink hydrogen glows against the darker lanes of dust. Faint blue oxygen lines shimmer near the most energetic stars. You follow a blue streak twisting around a bright knot, observing the subtle shifts in hue as density and temperature change. You feel as if you could trace the filament with your hands, moving along its curves, following its path through the cloud. Each small difference you see tells a story about energy, matter, and motion, revealing the delicate balance that governs this cosmic environment. The shuttle continues its smooth glide. You feel the subtle rotation as it curves slightly along the nebula's edge, giving you new angles and perspectives. Wisps of gas drift past, thin and almost transparent in some places, dense and glowing in others. You watch the light from background stars flicker through these variations, creating tiny pinpoints of color that dance across the translucent material. You follow them with your eyes, letting your attention move slowly from one patch to another, tracing the depth and complexity of the outer edge. You lean back slightly, absorbing the view. The nebula stretches out before you, a shifting, glowing cloud of hydrogen and helium. You notice the faint currents within the gas, patterns shaped by stellar winds and radiation. Some areas seem to pulse faintly, brighter and dimmer in a subtle rhythm. You imagine the interactions at the atomic level, hydrogen atoms absorbing energy, releasing it, interacting with helium and dust grains. These tiny interactions, multiplied over countless particles and light years, create the soft, living glow that fills your field of vision. You follow a particularly bright filament that arcs outward, fading slowly into the darkness beyond. The edges of the cloud are soft, almost mist-like, diffusing gently into the black void. You feel the slow, deliberate motion of the shuttle carrying you along, letting you track every curl and twist. The nebula moves almost imperceptibly, yet you sense the energy and motion within it. You notice areas where density is higher, where gas is pushed and pulled by invisible forces, and you follow each subtle change with your eyes. As you glide forward, the nebula's edge becomes more intricate. You see fine filaments winding around brighter knots, twisting and interweaving like threads in a delicate fabric. You watch how starlight interacts with these structures, highlighting edges, casting soft shadows, revealing subtle differences in density and temperature. You reach out with your mind, tracing each line, each curve, each loop, feeling the quiet, immense scale of the structure as if it stretches endlessly in all directions. You notice small, dark pockets where the gas is denser, almost opaque against the glow behind. You follow these shapes with your eyes, tracing the way they curve and stretch, observing how light fades along their edges. These pockets are regions of dense hydrogen and helium, areas that may eventually give birth to new stars. You feel a sense of anticipation, as though witnessing the slow building of energy and matter that will eventually ignite a new sun. You track the subtle interplay of light, shadow, and color, absorbing the slow, graceful rhythm of the nebula's outer edge. The shuttle hums steadily, carrying you forward along the boundary of gas. You watch thin wisps drift past, curling around brighter areas and fading gently into darkness. You notice faint variations in hue, subtle shifts that hint at temperature changes, density variations, and the effects of nearby starlight. You let your eyes follow each subtle motion, each gentle curl, feeling yourself immersed in the quiet, deliberate processes shaping the edge of this stellar cloud. You follow a narrow filament twisting around a small, bright knot. Its path curves slowly, wrapping gently around darker regions. You notice the tiny fluctuations in brightness along its length, evidence of density waves or small currents within the gas. You trace its path carefully, moving your gaze along each twist, letting the slow, quiet motion of the nebula fill your awareness. You feel a profound connection to the immensity of this environment, the calm rhythm of energy and matter unfolding across distances beyond comprehension. As you continue, the nebula spreads across your entire viewport. Faint tendrils extend outward, curling back gently, forming loops and arcs. You follow one long filament, tracing its twists and turns, observing how light interacts with it. Shadows deepen in the denser regions. Bright edges glow softly where starlight excites hydrogen. You feel the quiet motion of the cloud, the subtle dynamics of gas and dust, and the immense timescales over which these motions occur. You sense the rhythm, the gentle pulse of the nebula as it drifts silently through space. You drift along, absorbed in the patterns, watching the faint colors shift subtly as density and temperature vary. You notice how oxygen lines shimmer faintly in the blue, hydrogen glows in pale pinks and reds, and dust lanes trace delicate dark paths. You follow these lines with your eyes, imagining the slow flow of particles, the quiet collisions, and the gentle push and pull of gravity. The nebula moves imperceptibly, yet you feel its presence in every curl, every streak of color, every tiny shadow. As you drift deeper along the nebula's edge, you notice regions where the glow intensifies. These are dense knots of gas, pockets of hydrogen and helium that have gathered under gravity's quiet pull. You lean closer to the viewport, letting your eyes follow the soft contours of these clouds. They appear like glowing beads strung along the wisps of gas, brighter than their surroundings, yet still delicate in appearance. You feel a quiet thrill as you realize that within these knots, new stars are beginning to form. The gas here is dense, compressed over millions of years, and you are witnessing the first stages of creation itself. Your shuttle's instruments enhance your view, translating infrared light into soft, visible hues. You see shapes that would be invisible to the naked eye. Dense cores wrapped in layers of cooler gas, the very material that will feed the ignition of a new star. The infrared view shows you heat patterns within the knots. Warmer areas glow softly, revealing the gathering mass of matter spiraling inward. You trace the faint swirls with your eyes, watching the delicate motions, and feel the immense scale of this process. Each swirl represents billions of atoms moving together, guided by forces you cannot feel directly, yet your mind translates them into a quiet, flowing motion. You notice subtle outflows of gas streaming away from some of the denser regions. These are jets, narrow channels where material is ejected along the poles of a forming star. You follow one jet, watching it push through the surrounding gas, creating faint ripples and waves. You imagine the tiny particles being carried along, colliding gently with their neighbors, and feel the energy radiating through the cloud. Although you are safely inside the shuttle, you imagine the faint brush of radiation as it escapes from the forming stars, warming your skin slightly, like a gentle, intangible breeze. The brightest knots are small, intense points of light, signaling the ignition of fusion within the cores. You lean forward, eyes tracing the bright spots, noticing how they illuminate the surrounding gas. The light reveals subtle filaments curling around each forming star, tracing the paths along which matter is falling inward. You see gas spiraling toward the center, pulled in by gravity, while other material is pushed outward in slow, deliberate streams. The interplay of inward collapse and outward pressure shapes the structure of each knot, and you follow every movement with careful attention, feeling as if you could drift alongside the particles. Your gaze shifts to a particularly dense region. The infrared overlay shows you layers of gas wrapped tightly around a brightening core. You notice faint variations in temperature. The innermost parts glow more brightly, the surrounding layers cooler and softer in hue. You trace the gentle gradient with your eyes, moving from the heated core outward through the translucent shells. You imagine the delicate balance of forces at work, gravity pulling the gas inward, radiation pressure pushing outward, magnetic fields guiding the motion. The complex dance is slow and steady, yet immensely powerful, and you feel the weight of the process pressing gently on your imagination. You watch a cluster of forming stars, a small nursery within the larger nebula. Each star is surrounded by a halo of gas, some brighter, some faint. You follow the light, noticing how it interacts with the surrounding material. Some regions are illuminated clearly, while shadows from denser pockets of gas create intricate patterns. You trace the patterns carefully, moving your eyes along curves, folds, and filaments. You feel the motions as you watch them. Inward spirals, outward jets, soft ripples in the surrounding gas. The nebula is alive in a quiet, imperceptible way, and your senses adjust to its slow rhythm. The infrared view reveals cooler regions around the bright cores. You follow faint trails of dust, tracing them as they swirl around the forming stars. Some trails curl gently, following the flow of gas, while others stretch outward in faint arcs, pushed by radiation and stellar winds. You imagine reaching out and touching the dust, feeling it brushing past your hand, a cool, intangible presence. The scale is immense. Each arc stretches for light years, yet you feel a connection to its motion as you trace its path with your eyes. You notice that some of the young stars pulse faintly in brightness. The energy they release is enough to ionize the nearby gas, causing it to glow more intensely. You follow the changing light along the edges of dense knots, watching how the glow shifts and expands. Some areas brighten gradually, others flicker with small bursts, subtle but real. You feel the slow rhythm, the faint heartbeat of stellar birth, and let your attention move from one knot to another, tracing the interplay of light, motion, and matter. A particular core draws your focus. You watch as gas spirals inward, accelerating slightly as it approaches the center. The light from the nascent star warms the surrounding gas, creating a soft halo that blends into the cooler layers beyond. You follow the spiral carefully, noticing tiny variations in brightness that hint at uneven density in the material. The spiral twists gently, a slow cosmic whirlpool, and you feel the quiet motion brushing past you, the energy subtle but perceptible in your imagination. The shuttle glides past, giving you different angles of the forming stars. You shift your head slightly, observing how shadows move across filaments, how jets trace their paths through the surrounding gas. You feel the gentle vibration of the shuttle systems beneath your hands, a constant reminder that you are floating in this immense space, guided safely through processes that span light years. Each glance reveals new detail. Faint arcs of light, subtle ridges of dust, tiny knots within larger clouds, all moving slowly yet predictably under the forces of physics. You follow a faint stream of gas being pushed away from a forming star. The stream twists gently, a slow spiral of motion, interacting with the surrounding cloud. You imagine the tiny atoms colliding, scattering, and drifting in a slow dance. The infrared overlay shows warmer regions along the path, evidence of energy being released. You feel the energy brushing past you, as if the cloud itself is whispering its presence, a gentle reminder of the immense power at work, safely translated into light that your eyes can perceive. Your eyes move across a broader region, observing several forming stars at once. Some are brighter, others faint, each surrounded by halos of gas shaped uniquely by its environment. You trace each halo carefully, following curves and folds, noticing subtle changes in brightness and color. You feel the slow rhythm of their growth, the accumulation of matter, the gentle push and pull of forces that guide their formation. The scale is staggering, yet your mind can track it in the soft, deliberate motions of light and gas before you. You notice faint knots embedded deeper within the cloud, invisible without the infrared overlay. You follow them with your eyes, seeing the soft glow of heat indicating dense material gathering. You imagine gravity pulling the particles inward, slowly building the mass that will one day ignite. Around these cores, faint trails of gas drift outward, pushed by radiation and magnetic effects. You follow the trails carefully, letting your gaze map the structure, feeling the motion as a slow, quiet pulse in your awareness. The bright young stars illuminate nearby gas in soft, diffuse halos. You lean closer, pressing your forehead lightly to the viewport. You notice subtle variations. Some regions glow pink, others blue, faint hints of green in places where oxygen is present. You trace the glow along edges and curves, following the slow diffusion of light through the nebula. You feel the energy as a quiet brush, gentle and intangible, a subtle sensation that the mind translates from radiation into awareness. Jets of gas continue to stream outward from several young stars. You follow each one with careful attention, watching how it interacts with surrounding gas, carving faint paths and cavities. You trace the motion along its length, noting variations in brightness and density. You feel the energy brushing past your senses, the gentle push of radiation and particle streams, safely distant but perceptible in your imagination. The nebula is alive in its own rhythm, a slow, deliberate process that you can sense without hurry. You move your gaze across the cluster once more. You notice how each forming star shapes its surroundings, clearing small cavities, brightening nearby gas, sending subtle currents through the cloud. You follow a faint filament twisting around several cores, watching how it curves, fades, and brightens in response to radiation and movement. You feel the motion as you track it with your eyes, a quiet, immersive sense of cosmic rhythm that fills your awareness. The shuttle continues along its gentle path, carrying you past the cluster. You watch how the infrared and visible overlays reveal layers of gas, dense cores, faint arcs, and subtle shadows. You trace each pattern with deliberate attention, feeling the slow accumulation of matter, the gentle energy from the igniting stars, and the immense timescales over which these processes unfold. You sense the quiet motion, brushing past, the invisible flows of gas and radiation, and you absorb the beauty and precision of star formation unfolding before you. As you glide deeper into the nebula, your eyes adjust to the complex interplay of gas and dust. You notice the faint swirls moving lazily through space, ribbons of hydrogen curling around pockets of denser material. Tiny dust particles drift alongside the gas, invisible at first, but their presence becomes clear as light scatters off them, creating a soft, diffuse glow. You follow a small eddy of dust, twisting gently around a brighter knot, tracing its slow spiral with your gaze. The motion is subtle, yet constant, a quiet, deliberate flow that stretches over many light years, and you feel the scale pressing gently on your imagination. The light from nearby stars filters through the dust, scattering and producing delicate hues. You watch how some regions glow pink from hydrogen, while others catch a faint blue from ionized oxygen. You follow the shifting patterns as they move through the swirling gas. Shadows form where dust is densest, faintly obscuring light and creating layers that twist and fold around each other. You lean forward, pressing your forehead lightly against the viewport, feeling as if you could reach out and trace the contours of these filaments with your fingers. The textures are subtle, almost tactile, yet your mind translates them into a quiet sense of depth and motion. You notice that the dust is not just floating passively. Tiny grains interact with the surrounding gas, catalyzing the formation of molecules. You imagine hydrogen atoms sticking to the surfaces of dust grains, combining to form molecular hydrogen, the building blocks for future stars and planets. You follow a faint trail of dust where the gas seems slightly denser, visualizing molecules forming along its path. Each particle contributes to processes that span millions of years, yet the effect is visible here, in the soft light and gentle curls of the nebula. As you drift further, you see areas where the gas begins to rotate slowly. Large filaments twist in gentle spirals, eddies forming where the motion interacts with denser regions. You follow one spiral with your eyes, tracing the way it curves around a dense knot, seeing how smaller swirls break off, twisting independently before merging again. You feel the slow rotation in your mind, imagining the enormous forces at work. Gravity pulling, radiation pushing, particles colliding, all unfolding in quiet, deliberate motion. Some regions shimmer more brightly as light scatters off denser dust clouds. You notice fine filaments, almost thread-like, extending outward from the core of the nebula. The edges of these filaments catch the light, glowing faintly, and you follow each line carefully, observing the subtle twists, the way one filament bends around another. You feel the motion, the invisible currents of gas and dust brushing past you, and sense the immense scale of the interactions. The nebula moves slowly, almost imperceptibly, yet its rhythm is precise, guided by fundamental forces that shape the structure of the cloud. You shift your focus to a particularly dense patch of dust. Tiny particles scatter light in soft arcs, creating a faint halo around the denser knots. You follow the halo with your eyes, noticing subtle changes in intensity and color as the light passes through varying densities. Some regions glow more strongly in pink, others catch a pale blue, and dark lanes cut across the field like shadows in a mist. You trace these lanes, feeling the slow motion of the gas twisting around them, eddies forming along curves, and faint spirals radiating outward. The motion is slow and mesmerizing, a quiet ballet of matter and energy. The dust grains themselves seem to drift almost independently at first, yet their paths are guided by the gas currents. You follow a small cluster of grains swirling gently around a dense core. The grains move in subtle waves, colliding softly, scattering light in tiny flashes that catch your attention. You imagine each collision, each microscopic interaction contributing to the larger structure, helping molecules to form and providing seeds for future star formation. You trace the path of the grains as they spiral outward, feeling the gentle flow of energy brushing past your mind, a subtle awareness of the immense forces shaping the nebula. You notice turbulence forming in a region where two streams of gas converge. The motion is chaotic yet structured, eddies forming and dissipating slowly. You follow one eddy with your eyes, watching how it twists around denser filaments, occasionally splitting into smaller swirls before merging again. The interplay of motion and light creates delicate textures, shadows, and highlights that shift subtly as you track them. You lean forward slightly, letting your senses immerse in the quiet, complex dance of gas and dust. You feel as though you could drift alongside the eddy, carried gently by its motion, observing each subtle curve and twist. Light continues to scatter through the clouds, revealing new patterns as you shift your gaze. You notice faint streaks that appear almost like threads of silver woven through the gas. These are thin streams of dust, reflecting light from nearby young stars. You follow their paths carefully, tracing their gentle curves and arcs as they intertwine with the surrounding gas. The motion is slow, deliberate, and continuous, and you sense the immense timescales over which these patterns evolve. The nebula seems alive, moving in slow, imperceptible rhythms that fill your awareness without urgency. You follow a bright filament that curves around several knots of gas. Its edges shimmer softly as light scatters off dust particles. You track the motion along the filament, seeing subtle eddies where small clumps of matter twist independently. You feel the gentle brush of radiation in your mind, imagining the faint energy passing through the gas, influencing its motion, shaping its form. Each curve, each fold, each swirl of dust is a record of forces interacting over millions of years. Yet here, you witness them unfolding slowly before you, tangible in their pattern and motion. You observe the interface where dense dust meets more diffuse gas. Light scatters differently across this boundary, creating gradients of glow that fade gently, from bright pink to faint purple. You trace the boundary carefully, noticing subtle curls where the dust spirals into the surrounding gas. You follow these motions with deliberate attention, feeling the gentle rotation, the eddies forming and dissipating, the quiet turbulence that defines the nebula's structure. The scale is immense, yet your mind absorbs it as if floating alongside the material, feeling its rhythm, its calm, deliberate energy. A faint cluster of swirling gas draws your gaze. You follow a spiral that winds around a dense core, observing tiny knots of dust embedded within it. Some drift outward, carried by the currents, while others remain bound near the center. Light scatters off each grain, creating soft points of glow that highlight the motion. You trace each twist and curl with your eyes, imagining the microscopic collisions and interactions that shape the larger structure. You feel the energy flowing around the knots, gentle and safe. A quiet awareness that the nebula is alive in its own imperceptible way. You notice faint turbulence along the edges of denser regions. Tiny swirls form, spinning slowly before merging back into larger flows. You follow one such swirl, watching how it bends around a filament, how its light fades and brightens as density changes. You feel the motion brushing past your mind, a gentle sensation that translates the immense, imperceptible forces into something you can sense. The nebula moves slowly, deliberately, yet every particle, every grain contributes to the overall rhythm. You follow the motion patiently, letting it fill your awareness with its quiet flow. The shuttle glides smoothly along your path. You watch light scatter across dust grains, producing subtle glimmers in faint arcs. Filaments twist around dense cores, eddies form in low-density regions, and waves of gas flow outward, curling around obstacles. You trace each subtle motion with your eyes, letting the slow rotations, the gentle turbulence, and the delicate interplay of light and shadow fill your senses. The nebula unfolds before you, immense and alive, a complex dance of matter and energy moving through space over timescales far beyond human comprehension. You follow a particularly bright arc of dust that spirals outward from a knot of dense gas. The edges glow softly, scattering light in tiny points that shimmer like distant stars. You track the spiral carefully, observing how smaller curls break off, twist independently, and eventually merge back into the larger flow. You feel the gentle push of motion, imagining radiation and stellar winds nudging particles along, shaping the slow, deliberate flow of matter. Each movement is subtle, almost imperceptible, yet part of the vast, continuous rhythm of the nebula. You notice subtle shifts in color along the edges of filaments. Pink hydrogen glows more strongly where density is higher. Pale blue oxygen flickers along thinner edges, and faint shadows trace denser pockets of dust. You follow these gradients with your eyes, observing slow rotations, eddies, and small waves that ripple through the gas. You imagine particles colliding, sticking, forming molecules, creating the seeds of future stars and planets. The scale is immense, yet you feel intimately connected, following every curl, twist, and fold, as if drifting with the nebula itself. The soft hum of the shuttle beneath you provides a steady rhythm as you continue to drift. You watch as faint currents of gas twist gently, eddies forming and fading, filaments stretching across vast distances. Dust grains scatter light, creating delicate halos and soft textures that shift as you track them. You follow the motion slowly, letting your senses absorb the immense complexity, the quiet energy, and the deliberate pace of matter moving through space. You feel immersed, a silent participant in the grand choreography of the nebula. As you drift deeper into the nebula, your eyes catch the first bright edges along the gas clouds. These are ionization fronts, places where the light from young stars strips electrons from surrounding hydrogen and helium. You lean forward, pressing your forehead gently to the viewport, letting your gaze follow the soft glowing rims. The edges are brighter than the surrounding cloud, sharp in contrast yet delicate, as if painted with light. You see cavities forming behind these fronts, darker areas where gas has been pushed outward, hollowed by the energy of radiation. You follow the contours with your eyes, tracing the glowing lines that curve and twist over dozens of light years. You notice how some rims are faint, thin outlines barely brighter than the background, while others flare brightly, casting a soft illumination across nearby filaments. You shift your focus to a larger cavity, a bubble where a cluster of young stars has ionized the gas completely. The walls of this cavity glow in pale pink, faint blue, and soft purple, each color a reflection of the gas composition and temperature. You trace the bubble's edges, noticing small fingers of gas stretching inward, remnants of denser regions resisting the outward pressure. Your mind senses the motion, imagining the gentle push of radiation sweeping away lighter particles, leaving dense clumps behind. Light scatters across the rims, creating a diffuse glow that fills your entire viewport. You feel it almost as a tactile presence, the glow wrapping around your vision, tracing contours in soft, deliberate curves. You follow the faint ripples along the walls, watching eddies of gas twist and spiral back into the cloud. Some curls are subtle, almost imperceptible, while others are more distinct, shaped by stellar winds and the uneven pressure of radiation. You move your eyes along each rim, letting the motion fill your awareness, imagining the slow push of light shaping matter over thousands of years. A particular cluster of stars sends out powerful ultraviolet radiation. You see long, thin streaks of glowing gas, fingers pointing away from the source. You follow one finger carefully, noticing how it curls gently around a denser knot, tracing a spiral that extends outward for light years. The edges of the streak shimmer in soft pinks and blues, illuminated by the energy of ionization. You feel the subtle brush of power in your imagination, imagining photons colliding with hydrogen atoms, stripping electrons, producing light, and shaping the surrounding gas. Each streak is a visible record of forces moving through space, slow and deliberate yet immense. You drift closer to a bright rim, noticing tiny variations in brightness along its length. Some patches glow more intensely, revealing where the gas is denser, while fainter areas indicate thinner material. You follow the line slowly, watching how it bends around obstacles, curves around denser filaments, and twists gently under the influence of radiation pressure. You feel the motion as a soft, pervasive presence, imagining the energy flowing outward from the young stars, brushing past the gas, shaping it, illuminating it, filling the space around you. Some cavities appear almost spherical, soft-edged bubbles suspended in the larger cloud. You trace the surface of one carefully, noticing subtle gradients in color and intensity. Light scatters differently across the walls, revealing texture, filaments, and small knots of denser gas. You follow a small filament that stretches from the bubble's edge, twisting and curling as it drifts slowly outward. You sense the gentle rotation of the gas within the cavity, the quiet eddies moving along the curves of the rim. The scale is staggering. These cavities span dozens of light years, yet every motion feels intimate as your eyes follow the slow dance, You notice how some rims cast faint shadows into surrounding gas, creating delicate patterns of dark and light. You trace each shadow carefully, observing subtle curls where denser gas resists the push of radiation. You feel the motion, a gentle rhythm as the gas adjusts, spiraling and eddying around obstacles. Tiny knots embedded in the walls glow faintly, heated by the nearby stars, hinting at future sites of star formation. You follow each knot with your eyes, letting your attention map the complex interactions of pressure, gravity, and light. The largest cavities are remarkable in scale. You move your gaze along a wall that curves gracefully across your field of vision, bright pink at its core and fading to soft lavender at the edges. You notice smaller ionized fingers projecting outward, sculpting the surrounding gas like gentle streams of light. You follow their twists and bends carefully, imagining the photons rushing from the stars, colliding with hydrogen and helium, creating visible light in their wake. The motion is slow, deliberate, and continuous, yet the energy is immense, shaping the cloud over distances far beyond your comprehension. A faint ripple catches your attention along the edge of a rim. You follow it slowly, tracing its gentle curve. It is a subtle shock wave caused by sudden bursts of energy from a young star. You watch as the ripple spreads, pushing gas outward, compressing denser regions, creating faint shadows and highlights. The motion is quiet, almost imperceptible in real time, yet you feel the power in your mind, imagining the particles moving, colliding, and rearranging under the influence of radiation, pressure. The shock travels steadily, a soft pulse of energy flowing through the cloud. You observe a series of nested cavities, bubbles within bubbles, each illuminated softly by nearby stars. You trace the rims carefully, noting subtle differences in brightness, curvature, and thickness. Some rims are smooth, almost continuous arcs, while others are irregular, jagged where denser gas resists the push of radiation. You follow each subtle twist, each curve, imagining the energy flowing through the gas, pushing lighter material outward, sculpting the shape of the nebula. The scale is immense, yet your senses absorb every nuance, every flicker of light, every subtle ripple in motion. The diffuse glow continues to fill your view, soft and pervasive. You drift slowly along the edge of a bright rim, observing small filaments curling away from the cavity. You notice subtle changes in hue along the filaments: pink hydrogen, faint blue oxygen, traces of green where other elements scatter light. You follow each filament's path carefully, tracing spirals and arcs as they twist around small knots of denser gas. You feel the gentle push of energy brushing past your awareness, the radiation and pressure shaping motion, forming patterns that will last for millions of years. You move to a region where two cavities meet. The rims curve toward each other, creating a delicate junction of light and shadow. You follow the edges, tracing the subtle twists and overlaps, noticing how the gas forms faint arcs as it responds to competing radiation flows. You watch soft waves travel along the rims, slight compressions that bend and twist gently. You feel the motion as a slow pulse, a subtle rhythm of energy and matter interacting on enormous scales. Each curve and ripple is evidence of forces shaping the nebula over unimaginable distances and times. Light scatters across the junction, creating a soft, immersive glow. You observe tiny filaments connecting the rims, faint threads that twist and fold in slow motion. You follow each thread carefully, tracing gentle curls, loops, and spirals. The motion is deliberate, the structure intricate, and you feel fully immersed in the dynamics of the nebula. Radiation from young stars continues to sculpt the gas, ionizing it, pushing it, forming visible rims that glow faintly against the darker background. You sense the immense scale, the quiet flow, and the gentle motion that fills your awareness. You drift along a large bubble, following its curved rim that stretches across several light years. Light scatters through the ionized gas, creating soft gradients from bright pink near the stars to faint lavender along thinner edges. You notice faint knots of dense material embedded along the rim, glowing softly in response to ionization. You trace their contours carefully, observing gentle twists and small eddies in surrounding gas. You feel the slow rhythm of motion, the quiet pressure of radiation shaping matter, and the immense scale of structures that extend far beyond what you can see in a single glance. A faint shock wave travels outward from a bright young star at the center of a cavity. You follow it with your eyes, tracing the subtle ripple along the surrounding gas. It curves around filaments, brushing lightly past denser knots, compressing some areas while leaving others untouched. The motion is delicate yet powerful, a slow sculpting force that reshapes the nebula over thousands of years. You feel the energy in your mind, imagining particles pushed along, electrons stripped from atoms, light scattering and illuminating the surrounding gas. You trace the gentle arc, observing the subtle glow and the shadows it casts across the cloud. You notice smaller ionized fingers projecting from the rims of multiple cavities. They twist and curl along the paths of least resistance, following subtle variations in density. You follow each with deliberate attention, tracing curves, spirals and loops as they drift slowly outward. You feel the motion, the quiet energy, the gentle push of radiation shaping these delicate forms. The soft glow fills your vision, immersive and almost tangible, as if the light itself brushes across your senses. The scale is immense, yet your awareness embraces every detail, from the faintest curl to the largest rim stretching across dozens of light years. As you drift along the nebula, your eyes catch the first dark ribbons cutting across the glowing gas. These are dust lanes, dense filaments of matter that block the light from stars and ionized gas behind them. You lean closer to the viewport, letting your gaze follow a particularly long lane that stretches across the field of view. The darkness is soft but definite, a stark contrast to the surrounding pink and blue glow. You trace its edges carefully, noticing tiny tendrils branching off, curling gently like frozen streams. Each branch seems deliberate, shaped by gravity, motion, and subtle pressure from surrounding radiation. You follow the lane along its length, observing how it twists and folds over itself. Some sections are thick, almost opaque, hiding everything behind them. Others are thin, revealing faint glimpses of brighter gas beyond. You feel a sense of depth, imagining the sheer density of particles in these lanes, how a single cubic centimeter contains enough matter to influence the surrounding gas. You notice how light bends subtly around the edges, scattering off less dense regions and revealing intricate texture along the dark filament. Several lanes intersect in a delicate web. You guide your eyes along each branch, tracing the intersections and watching how filaments curve and spiral around one another. You imagine the immense scale, each lane spanning multiple light years, thousands of times larger than our solar system. The length and thickness are hard to grasp, yet your eyes follow the subtle motions, the faint flows along the edges, and the way shadows deepen where dust is densest. You feel the quiet weight of these structures, the slow, patient accumulation of matter over millions of years. Some lanes cut across glowing cavities, creating dramatic contrast. You watch how the light highlights tiny edges along the filament, revealing small clumps of gas clinging to the dust. You follow these clumps carefully, tracing their positions and subtle motions as the gas moves slowly around them. The shadows are deep, almost tactile in their presence, and your mind senses the density as you track their form. Each curve and twist is unique, shaped by local forces, yet part of the larger pattern of the nebula. You notice a particularly long dark lane stretching diagonally across your field of view. You trace it slowly from one end to the other. It weaves gently, curling around brighter knots, splitting into smaller threads before merging again. You feel the rhythm of its flow, the quiet pull of gravity, the gentle shaping influence of radiation from nearby young stars. You follow each filament with care, letting your eyes wander along tiny branches and loops, fully immersed in the structure's intricate detail. Light from nearby stars illuminates the edges of some lanes, creating soft halos that outline the darkness. You watch how faint colors glow along the rim. Soft pink hydrogen, pale blue oxygen, hints of green where other elements scatter light. You follow the halo carefully, letting the glow guide your gaze along the contours of the lane. The contrast is striking, the dark mass of dust against the bright nebula, and you sense the immense scale as your eyes trace every curve, every fold, every branching tendril. You notice smaller filaments projecting outward from the main lanes. Some are straight, others curl gently, connecting dense regions of dust to brighter areas of gas. You trace each one slowly, observing how they snake across light years of space, bending under the influence of local forces. The motion is subtle, almost imperceptible, yet you feel it in your mind, the slow, deliberate shaping of matter on enormous scales. You follow the faintest tendrils with the same care as the largest lanes, tracing their paths as they weave intricate patterns throughout the nebula. The densest lanes appear almost like walls suspended in space. You follow one particularly thick lane, noticing small clumps embedded within it, faintly illuminated by scattered light. You trace each clump, observing its interaction with the surrounding gas. Some gas flows around the clump, forming gentle arcs and curls, while other sections remain undisturbed, shadowed by the dense dust. You feel the movement, the slow interplay of pressure, gravity, and radiation shaping the filament over millions of years. Several dark lanes converge near a bright star cluster. You guide your eyes along each lane, following their approach and noting how the edges twist subtly under radiation pressure. Some lanes appear stretched, pulled thin by surrounding gas, while others remain thick and opaque. You imagine the vast distances involved, each lane spanning tens of light years, yet every twist and branch visible in your view. You trace the intricate network carefully, feeling the quiet complexity of the nebula's structure, the delicate balance of forces holding it together. You shift your focus to a shadowed cavity behind a dense filament. The lane cuts across the glowing gas, creating deep contrast. You follow the shadows carefully, noticing faint filaments within the darkness itself, smaller threads almost hidden in the gloom. You trace each one slowly, observing tiny curls and loops, imagining how even these minor features influence the flow of surrounding gas. You feel the depth, the layering, the immense three-dimensional structure, as if you could drift alongside the dust and peer into the hidden spaces between lanes. Light scatters along edges of other filaments, creating faint arcs and ripples. You follow a gently curling thread extending from a main lane, noticing tiny knots embedded along its length. Each knot glows faintly, heated slightly by nearby radiation. You trace each subtle bend, each small spiral, feeling the quiet rhythm of the nebula's internal motion. You sense the slow accumulation of dust and gas, the persistent shaping forces, and the immense scale that stretches far beyond your view. A long lane stretches across a bright rim, creating a dramatic contrast between light and shadow. You follow it carefully, tracing every curve, every split, every curl along its path. You notice how faint gas streams wrap around the filament, creating gentle eddies. You feel the motion in your mind, imagining the slow flow of matter, the delicate shaping by radiation pressure, and the quiet sculpting influence of gravity. The lane's length is hard to grasp, spanning dozens of light years, but your eyes track it fully, immersed in its pattern and motion. You notice smaller parallel lanes forming nearby. They twist and curl, intersecting with the main filament. You guide your gaze along each one, following subtle deviations, gentle arcs, and tiny curls. You feel the slow rotation and movement of gas around these lanes, the eddies and flows creating complex, layered patterns. You trace the intricate network with deliberate attention, letting your mind absorb the structure, scale, and motion. You feel the nebula as an immense, living system of shadows and light. You drift past a massive, dark lane stretching across your field of view. Its edges glow faintly where light scatters, outlining the structure in subtle pink and blue hues. You follow the curve, tracing gentle bends, small loops, and branching tendrils. You feel the immense scale, imagining the lane spanning tens of light years, yet every detail visible as if suspended within reach. Tiny filaments within the darkness hint at unseen structure, small eddies and twists hidden in shadow. You trace each carefully, feeling the depth, the layering, and the quiet energy shaping the dust over millions of years. A delicate web of lanes stretches outward from a dense knot. You guide your eyes along each thread, watching as some twist gently, some split into smaller branches, and others merge back into larger filaments. You notice the faint glow along edges, scattered light revealing structure within the darkness. You trace the intricate pattern slowly, feeling the quiet rhythm of matter moving through space, the interplay of light, shadow, and gravity shaping everything. The scale is vast, yet your mind perceives it intimately, every twist and turn clear and immersive. You follow a lane curving around a bright cavity. The contrast between dark dust and glowing gas is striking. You trace the edges, noticing subtle folds and curls. Some sections twist gently, forming delicate spirals, while others remain straight and rigid. You feel the motion of surrounding gas as it flows along the filament. Eddies forming along curves, spirals wrapping around small knots. You sense the immense timescale, the slow shaping forces, and the quiet beauty of structure emerging from motion and gravity. You drift slowly along another long lane, guiding your gaze from one end to the other. You notice tiny branches extending outward, each curling gently, each influencing the flow of gas around it. Light scatters along the edges, highlighting delicate folds. You follow every subtle motion, every eddy and spiral, feeling the intricate structure of the nebula, the immense scale, and the quiet, patient shaping of dust and gas over millions of years. The shadowed lanes are alive in their own slow rhythm, and you drift along with them, fully immersed in the experience. As you drift closer to a cluster of massive young stars, you notice streams of gas and plasma shooting outward from their surfaces. These stellar winds move swiftly, carving paths through the surrounding nebula. You follow one flow with your eyes, tracing the way it pushes against denser gas, forming soft cavities and gentle arcs. The light from nearby stars glints off the flowing plasma, casting faint, shifting highlights across the surrounding dust. You feel the subtle motion in your awareness, as if the energy itself brushes past you, carrying the faint warmth of radiation and the gentle push of moving matter. The outflows stretch over vast distances, tens of light years in some cases, and you guide your gaze along their length. You see subtle changes in density. Some streams are thick and bright, others diffuse and faint, curling as they interact with obstacles in their path. You follow the twists and bends slowly, observing how radiation pressure shapes the edges, compressing gas here, creating faint waves there. You notice that cavities form behind these flows, soft-edged regions where the plasma has cleared out lighter material, leaving darker voids surrounded by glowing rims. You move your attention to a particularly bright outflow. Light scatters along the edge, revealing delicate filaments that twist and spiral as they follow the path of the wind. You trace a small knot of gas within the flow, watching how it swirls and spins, guided by subtle differences in pressure. You feel the slow motion, imagining the gentle push of charged particles, the radiation nudging gas along, shaping patterns that are immense yet visible in their detail. Each filament curves and bends, a quiet record of forces at work over millions of years. As you drift along, you notice faint ripples traveling along the plasma streams. You follow them carefully, tracing the way the density changes subtly, creating shifting shadows and highlights. You see small shocks forming where the flow meets denser gas, the bright edges marking regions of sudden compression. You guide your gaze along each shock, observing the delicate interplay of motion, light, and pressure. The nebula feels alive in this region, energy flowing through it, shaping, sculpting, and illuminating matter. You watch a larger cavity being pushed outward by multiple stellar winds. The walls glow softly, catching light from surrounding stars. You trace their curves, noticing gentle folds and eddies where gas resists the push. Some regions are brighter, heated by radiation, while others remain shadowed, protected by dense dust. You feel the motion as a subtle rhythm, imagining the steady sweep of plasma moving through space, carrying energy and shaping the nebula's structure over enormous distances. A faint stream of plasma curls around a dense filament. You follow it carefully, tracing the spiral path as it twists past obstacles. The edges shimmer in soft pink and pale blue, illuminated by ionization from nearby stars. You notice small clumps within the stream, drifting slowly, carried along by the flow. You feel the subtle energy brushing past, imagining the charged particles moving along magnetic lines, the gentle push shaping the gas and dust. Each curl, each fold, each spiral is a trace of forces working over millions of years, yet you perceive them in real time, immersive and vivid. You notice a bright jet extending from one of the massive stars, piercing a darker region of the nebula. You follow the jet with your eyes, tracing its linear path, observing how it widens slightly as it moves outward. Light scatters off surrounding dust, creating faint halos that highlight the motion. You feel the gentle push of the flow in your mind, imagining the energy of plasma and radiation pressure moving outward, clearing paths, forming cavities, and shaping the surrounding cloud. The scale is immense, yet each detail is visible and absorbing. Two streams of plasma interact gently, merging and twisting as they move along the paths of least resistance. You follow the curves, observing the subtle eddies that form at intersections, the faint spirals of gas that break away before merging back. You notice how radiation illuminates certain edges, creating soft lines of glow along denser regions. You trace each movement slowly, feeling the gentle push of energy shaping the nebula structure. The motion is continuous, deliberate, a quiet dance of matter and light over vast distances. You drift past smaller outflows, delicate streams curling around denser filaments. You watch how each stream interacts with the surrounding gas, forming subtle arcs and waves. Light glints off edges, highlighting textures and folds in the plasma. You follow a small knot drifting along a stream, tracing its slow spin and drift. You feel the subtle motion, the steady flow of energy guiding its path. Every curve, spiral, and fold is part of the nebula's immense, continuous rhythm, visible here as a soft, glowing ballet. You notice a faint cavity forming behind a particularly energetic outflow. The surrounding gas glows softly in response to ionization. You trace the rim of the cavity, following delicate twists and folds where plasma meets denser material. You watch as light scatters along small filaments, creating soft arcs and highlights. You feel the motion, subtle yet perceptible, imagining the push of radiation and plasma sculpting the nebula over thousands of years. You follow each curve with careful attention, letting the intricate patterns fill your awareness. A cluster of massive stars sends multiple streams outward in different directions. You drift along, tracing each flow, observing how they interact, merge, and bend around denser clouds. Light scatters differently along each stream, producing gentle gradients of color and intensity. You follow a spiral where two flows meet, noticing faint waves along the edges, subtle ripples that mark the movement of matter. You feel the energy, the gentle push, the motion shaping the gas and dust over enormous distances. You focus on the edge of a cavity illuminated by a nearby young star. Plasma streams curl gently along the wall, forming small spirals and loops. You trace the path of each flow, observing how radiation pressure guides the motion, shaping subtle folds in the gas. Light scatters off dust particles along the edge, creating soft halos and gradients. You follow these halos carefully, feeling the gentle rhythm of motion and energy. Each filament, each twist, each curl contributes to the structure of the nebula, and you feel immersed in the slow, deliberate unfolding of matter and light. You drift along a larger outflow, tracing its gentle bend as it moves away from the star cluster. The edges glow softly, highlighting small filaments of gas caught in the flow. You follow a faint spiral that curls around a dense knot, observing subtle eddies and twists in the plasma. You feel the slow rhythm, the gentle push of energy, the quiet shaping forces at work. Light dances along the edges, scattering across dust, grains, and illuminating small cavities. You sense the immense scale and the delicate complexity, immersed in the quiet motion of the nebula. You observe smaller jets branching from a main outflow. They twist and curl around nearby filaments, following paths shaped by local density and radiation. You follow each branch carefully, tracing the subtle motion, the gentle interaction with surrounding gas, and the soft illumination along edges. You feel the quiet push of energy, the rhythm of plasma flows sculpting the nebula's structure over vast distances. Each twist, spiral, and arc is a visible record of forces moving matter, shaping cavities, and illuminating the cloud. You notice a faint ripple traveling along a stream of plasma. You follow it carefully, observing the subtle changes in density and light. Small eddies form where the flow interacts with denser gas. You trace each curl and fold, letting your eyes follow the continuous motion. You feel the gentle push of radiation and plasma, the subtle shaping of matter over time. Light glints along edges, highlighting intricate details and textures. You drift along with the flow, fully immersed in the motion, energy, and patterns sculpted by stellar winds. A particularly bright jet catches your attention, extending far into a darker region of the nebula. You follow its straight path, observing how edges glow softly as light scatters off surrounding dust. Small filaments spiral along the flow, curling gently as they are carried outward. You feel the energy in your awareness, the subtle motion of plasma, the gentle shaping of gas and dust. Each twist, arc, and curl is part of a continuous, immense process sculpting the nebula, and your senses absorb every detail of light, motion, and energy. You ease your view back slightly, letting the nebula fill a larger portion of your vision. Its intricate filaments, glowing rims, and dark lanes stretch across your field of view. But now you can see the larger context. You notice faint clusters of stars nearby, tiny points of light scattered like dust across the cosmic canvas. Some clusters glow softly in soft gold and pale blue, while others shimmer faintly, revealing the presence of thousands of individual stars gathered together. You follow your eyes from one cluster to another, letting the distances settle in your mind. These stars are far away from each other, yet they form coherent shapes that hint at the gravitational threads binding them together. Beyond the nebula, you catch glimpses of cosmic voids. Vast regions of near-empty space punctuate the structure of your surroundings, stretching silently for millions of light years. You drift your gaze across these darker areas, noticing how they make the glowing regions of the nebula stand out more vividly. Light from the nebula contrasts sharply against these silent stretches, giving you a sense of the immense scale of the galaxy around you. You follow subtle gradients of brightness, soft shifts from glowing gas to emptier regions, feeling the gentle rhythm of motion as the galaxy rotates slowly on its axis. Faint background galaxies appear beyond the nebula, tiny swirls of light with subtle color gradients. You trace the edges of a distant spiral, noting the faint bluish hue of young stars in its arms. Another elliptical galaxy glows softly in pale gold, its shape distinct yet far away, a reminder of structures far larger than your current nebula. You feel a quiet awe as your eyes move across the field, tracing the vast interconnectedness of stars, nebulae, and galaxies. The nebula you have been exploring is only one part of a vast, structured environment, one intricate feature within the immense body of the Milky Way. The nebula itself shows new details from this wider perspective. You notice subtle color variations across its structure: pink and red hydrogen regions, pale blue from oxygen, faint green where other elements emit light. You follow the gentle transitions between these colors, tracing soft gradients along filaments and rims. Some regions glow more brightly, indicating denser gas and hotter young stars. Other regions fade gently into shadowed lanes and cavities, revealing the three-dimensional nature of the cloud. You move your gaze slowly along these patterns, letting the flow of light and shadow immerse your senses. Nearby star clusters seem to hover in space, each with its own faint halo of diffuse light. You trace the edges of a small cluster, noting individual stars clustered closely together. Some appear blue and young, others pale yellow, older and cooler. You follow your gaze across the cluster, imagining the gravitational pull keeping the stars bound together, the slow, silent motion as each star follows its path around a shared center. The cluster feels alive yet timeless, moving gently in space while your view captures it from a distant, serene perspective. The dark lanes of the nebula now appear even more, striking against this larger backdrop. You trace the paths of twisting filaments across the glowing cloud, observing their shadows stretching into the surrounding brightness. You notice subtle motions within the dust, eddies and folds moving slowly as radiation and stellar winds continue to shape them. Even from this distance, the textures and contrasts are clear, a delicate interplay of light and shadow. You follow the curves and curls along each filament, feeling the immense size of the structures in relation to the smaller star clusters surrounding them. Faint, isolated patches of glowing gas lie beyond the main nebula. You drift your gaze over these regions, noticing their soft, ethereal glow, the gentle gradients of color fading into the darkness. Some appear as tiny pockets of hydrogen, glowing pale pink. Others show hints of blue or green, scattered light from ionized oxygen or other elements. You follow your eyes carefully, tracing gentle arcs and edges, letting your senses absorb the slow flow of energy and light across these distant pockets. Each region feels connected to the larger nebula, yet distinct, forming a quiet network of matter and light across space. Background galaxies add subtle movement to your perspective. You watch as faint spirals and elongated shapes drift slowly, a gentle reminder of the enormous distances involved. You follow a spiral galaxy, noticing faint star-forming regions along its arms. Light scatters softly from these areas, blending into the darker backdrop of space. Another galaxy shimmers faintly, elliptical in shape, its edges blurred by distance. You feel the calm sweep of the cosmos around you, the nebula now a single feature among countless structures, each moving gently over cosmic time. You focus again on the nebula itself, letting the full structure fill your awareness. You see the bright rims and ionized cavities, dark lanes weaving through glowing filaments, and clusters of young stars embedded within. From this perspective, you sense the full scale. The nebula stretches tens of light years, yet each filament, cavity, and cluster is discernible. You drift your eyes along the largest features, following long arcs of glowing gas, curling dark filaments, and subtle folds in the cloud. You feel the three-dimensional structure, the sense of depth enhanced by the surrounding stars and distant galaxies. The colors shift softly as you adjust your focus. Light from young stars casts gentle pinks and reds across hydrogen regions. Pale blue edges highlight oxygen, and faint green tints trace other ionized elements. You follow the gradients slowly, letting your vision wander across the nebula's curves and folds. You notice faint motion within the cloud, gas flows, eddies, and gentle rotations, all imperceptibly slow yet visible as subtle patterns. You feel the quiet rhythm of cosmic forces shaping the nebula over millions of years. You drift past a nearby cluster, letting its soft halo of stars guide your gaze. You observe faint streams of light, connecting the cluster to the nebula, tenuous filaments of matter that hint at gravitational influence. You follow each stream, tracing the subtle flow of gas and dust toward and away from the cluster. You feel the vastness of space in these connections, the quiet pull of gravity stretching across light years, shaping motion and guiding the evolution of matter. The nebula now feels both intimate and immense. You can trace individual filaments, bright rims, and small knots of gas, yet also perceive its place in the galactic structure, surrounded by star clusters, cosmic voids, and distant galaxies. You drift slowly, letting your awareness encompass both the intricate detail and the immense context. The interplay of light, shadow, color, and motion creates a sense of harmony and scale, a quiet orchestration of matter and energy across vast distances. You watch as faint motions ripple through the nebula. Gas swirls slowly along filaments, small eddies curl around dense knots, and cavities gently expand under the influence of radiation pressure. Light scatters softly across these flows, creating shifting highlights and subtle gradients. You follow each movement with care, letting your senses absorb the quiet energy shaping the nebula. The slow, deliberate motions emphasize the timescales at play, spanning thousands to millions of years, yet your perception captures them in real time. You drift past faint, diffuse regions beyond the main nebula, tracing subtle variations in brightness. Some pockets glow softly, their hydrogen illuminated by distant stars. Others remain shadowed, shaped by dense dust lanes or cavities carved by stellar winds. You let your gaze follow each transition, observing the gentle flow of light, the quiet motion of gas, and the immense scale that stretches beyond comprehension. You feel fully immersed, the nebula now both a detailed, tangible structure and a component of a vast, cosmic environment. Faint galaxies glimmer at the edges of your view, tiny spirals and diffuse ellipses drifting slowly through the void. You follow their shapes, tracing the subtle colors of star-forming regions and older stellar populations. Each galaxy provides a frame of reference, highlighting the relative scale of the nebula in its galactic context. You sense the immense distances, the slow, patient motion, and the quiet, vast structure of the universe surrounding your current view. Finally, you drift back to the nebula itself, letting its full complexity fill your awareness. You trace long, twisting filaments, bright rims, and shadowed lanes. You observe star clusters, flowing gas, and subtle cavities formed by radiation and stellar winds. Light scatters gently along edges, creating gradients of color and brightness that shift softly as you adjust your gaze. You feel the immense scale, the slow rhythm of motion, and the quiet beauty of a nebula as one component in a vast, structured galaxy. You sense the harmony of matter, light, and motion across space and time, fully immersed in the cosmic perspective surrounding you. You bring your focus closer, letting the nebula fill more of your field of view. Filaments and pillars stretch toward you, twisting and curling like frozen rivers of gas and dust. You drift alongside one thin filament, tracing its gentle curve from the glowing edge of the nebula into shadowed space. Light scatters along its surface, soft pink and pale blue blending where hydrogen and oxygen glow. You reach out with your gaze, letting your eyes follow every curve and subtle fold. Tiny knots of denser material cling along the filament, almost imperceptible, yet distinct in the glow of scattered light. A tall pillar rises nearby, dense at its base and tapering toward a faint tip. You guide your eyes along its length, tracing each ridge and groove. Shadows shift subtly across the surface, creating textures that feel almost tangible. You notice faint emission regions along its sides, soft glows where radiation from nearby stars illuminates hydrogen clouds. You follow these patches slowly, watching as subtle gradients reveal the three-dimensional shape. You feel the pillar's height in your perception, spanning several light years, its base wide enough to contain thousands of times the distance from the Sun to Earth. Tiny knots within the gas reveal the earliest stages of star formation, You focus on one such clump, dense and faintly glowing. Infrared observations allow you to see it clearly despite the surrounding dust. You follow the shape of the knot, tracing its slight bulges and folds. You imagine the pressure inside, the slow gravitational collapse, and the quiet ignition of fusion that will eventually light a new star. Light scatters softly off the edges, illuminating small filaments connecting to the knot. You let your gaze wander along these connections, tracing each delicate path with your eyes as if you could feel the flow of gas along them. A small cluster of molecular clouds drifts near the tip of a filament. You watch closely, noting subtle shifts in color and brightness. Soft pinks from hydrogen blend with pale blues from ionized oxygen. You follow the gentle curves along the clouds, watching faint eddies and folds where gas swirls around denser regions. Tiny knots embedded within the clouds glow faintly, each one a potential protostar. You trace each with your gaze, letting your eyes move along the connecting filaments, feeling the intricate network of matter and energy in 3 dimensions. You notice fine threads of dust projecting from a larger pillar. They curl gently, branching into smaller filaments that weave around glowing gas. You trace each branch with careful attention, following the subtle twists and loops. Light glints softly off edges, scattering in faint colors. You move your focus slowly along the filament, letting your gaze touch the surface, imagining the texture and density as your eyes follow the contours. The motions are almost imperceptible, gentle flows of gas guided by pressure, radiation, and gravity. Another pillar stands nearby, more massive and shadowed. You follow the glowing edges, observing subtle folds and ridges. Small knots of protostellar material cling along its surface. You drift closer, letting your eyes move along the ridges, following gentle gradients of light and color. Soft pinks and pale blues shift with subtle variations in density. You notice faint wisps of gas drifting from the sides, curling slowly as they respond to radiation from nearby stars. You trace each wisp carefully, feeling the gentle rhythm of motion as matter flows and settles along the pillar's surface. A dense filament stretches across your view, dotted with tiny knots of gas. You guide your gaze along the entire length, following gentle curves and subtle bends. Light scatters differently along each knot, revealing textures and folds. You observe faint emission regions between knots, glowing softly where ionized hydrogen radiates. You follow each tiny thread, letting your eyes move along connecting filaments, tracing intricate patterns across the cloud. The structure feels delicate yet immense, spanning light years while still offering discernible detail to your senses. You shift focus to a faint emission region near the base of a pillar. Softly glowing, it appears almost like a watercolor of pinks and blues. You drift closer, letting your gaze follow gentle gradients in color and brightness. Small, dense knots of material dot the region, each hinting at future star formation. You trace each knot and the surrounding gas, letting your eyes wander along subtle folds and curls. The light scatters along edges, highlighting textures and shapes that feel almost touchable as you follow their patterns. Tiny filaments connect larger structures, forming a web of gas and dust across the nebula. You drift along one filament, tracing its twists and turns. Knots of denser material lie along its length, faintly glowing where radiation illuminates them. You follow each connection, allowing your gaze to flow along the paths as if you were tracing them with your hand. The intricate pattern is mesmerizing, delicate threads weaving together into a coherent, 3-dimensional network. You feel the nebula's structure, the way filaments connect pillars, knots, and emission regions, forming a living, evolving cloud. A small, glowing cavity forms near one of the pillars. You guide your eyes along its edges, tracing gentle curves and subtle folds. Light scatters across the cavity, illuminating tiny filaments and knots along the interior walls. You observe faint motions in the gas, gentle flows, tiny eddies, subtle shifts in brightness. You follow the pattern with your gaze, letting your eyes move along every contour. You feel the scale, the texture, and the delicate interplay of matter and light. The cavity seems alive in its slow, quiet evolution, a testament to the dynamic processes shaping the nebula. You notice fine, faint wisps of gas curling away from a dense knot. You follow their path slowly, tracing the gentle spirals as they drift outward. Light from nearby young stars glances off the edges, creating soft gradients of pink and blue. You feel the gentle motion as the wisps move, subtly pushed by radiation and stellar winds. You trace each curl and fold, letting your eyes explore the delicate texture of the gas, the intricate patterns connecting it to surrounding filaments and pillars. You focus on a small cluster of protostellar knots. They glow faintly, almost imperceptibly against the surrounding dust. You drift closer with your gaze, following each knot's tiny contours. You notice soft color variations, pale pinks along hydrogen-rich edges, subtle blues where oxygen glows. You let your eyes trace connecting filaments, following gentle arcs and subtle folds in the surrounding gas. The intricate detail is immersive, and you feel the scale. These knots are tiny compared to the nebula, yet they are the seeds of future stars. A delicate filament curls around a pillar, connecting a faint emission region to a dense knot. You drift along its path, tracing twists and loops. Tiny wisps of gas spiral outward, faintly illuminated by scattered light. You follow the movement carefully, observing subtle variations in brightness and color along the filament. You let your eyes move along the structure, tracing every curl and fold. You feel the delicate texture, the intricate weaving of gas and dust, and the quiet rhythm of the nebula's internal motion. You notice faint arcs of emission extending from the side of a dense pillar. You drift closer with your gaze, following each arc slowly. Light scatters off dust along the edges, creating soft highlights that shift subtly as you move your focus. You follow gentle folds in the gas, tracing the way the arcs connect to knots and filaments. Tiny clumps of matter lie along the arcs, faintly glowing where radiation illuminates them. You trace each clump and fold with your eyes, fully immersed in the structure's intricate detail and subtle motion. A slender filament stretches across the nebula, connecting two dense regions. You drift along its length, tracing gentle bends and small loops. Faint wisps of gas spiral outward, guided by radiation and local flows. You follow each spiral carefully, noticing color variations along the filament. Soft pinks, pale blues, subtle greens. You let your gaze flow along the path, tracing twists and curls with your eyes, as if you could move along it physically. The texture, the subtle motion, and the delicate patterns fill your awareness, immersing you in the nebula's fine detail. You focus on a tiny knot embedded in a filament, glowing faintly against shadowed gas. You drift closer, tracing its contours with your eyes. Light scatters softly along its edges, revealing delicate folds and small protrusions. You follow the filament connecting the knot to surrounding structures, tracing twists, curls, and loops. Each fold, each ridge, each tiny projection adds to the complex pattern of gas and dust. You feel the texture and structure as if you could reach out and trace it with your hands, fully immersed in the nebula's intricacy. You begin to drift slowly away from the nebula, letting your eyes linger on its glowing edges one last time. The filaments stretch and twist behind you, delicate threads of pink, blue, and pale green fading gently as the distance grows. You notice the bright rims and dark lanes softening into a luminous haze, the intricate knots of protostars shrinking, merging into a unified glow. You feel the sense of motion as the nebula recedes, a quiet drift through space, carried by your awareness and the gentle pace of your journey. As you back away further, entire pillars and cavities fade into the background, their shapes still perceptible but softer, less distinct. You follow the glow of ionized hydrogen and scattered oxygen, observing how light continues to fill the nebula's interior even from afar. Shadows lengthen, contours blur, and the nebula's overall shape becomes more apparent. You feel the scale of what you have seen. Tens of light years across, immense yet intricate, each detail now part of a larger whole. The nebula seems to breathe, its gentle glow fading slowly, but maintaining a quiet presence in the cosmic space around you. Beyond the nebula, you notice nearby star clusters you had glimpsed earlier. They now form a subtle constellation around the glowing cloud, points of light connected by invisible gravitational threads. You trace your gaze across the clusters, noting their gentle color variations, pale blues, soft yellows, and faint golds. Light scatters softly from their combined glow, blending into the faint haze of the galactic background. You feel a quiet rhythm, a cosmic pulse that stretches across the vastness of space, tying the nebula, clusters, and background stars together into a single, delicate structure. The galactic background expands in your field of vision. Faint swirls of distant stars and diffuse nebulae add depth and context. You notice subtle gradients in brightness, pale glows from massive star populations, and faint voids between dense regions. You drift slowly, letting your perception absorb the layered complexity of the galaxy. Light, motion, and structure combine to form a vast, interconnected network. You feel the quiet majesty of it all, the gentle hum of space, the calm, deliberate movement of matter across millions of light years. You pause to observe the nebula one final time, its intricate network of filaments, pillars, and knots now smaller but still visible. Light scatters across edges, shadows deepen in darker lanes, and faint emission regions glow softly. You follow the remaining details with your eyes, tracing each line and curve, feeling the quiet flow of gas, the delicate balance of pressure and radiation, and the slow, patient sculpting of matter by the stars within. Each filament, each cavity, each knot remains in your perception, a part of the nebula's immense and beautiful structure. The surrounding stars gain prominence as the nebula fades. You notice individual points of light, some bright and young, others faint and older. You trace patterns among them, clusters and small groupings connected by gravity. Light scatters off faint interstellar dust between stars, creating soft glows that hint at the unseen matter in the galactic plane. You drift your gaze slowly across these points, following subtle shifts in brightness and color, absorbing the quiet order and scale of the galaxy. You feel suspended, floating gently in the vast emptiness, fully immersed in the cosmic expanse. As the nebula continues to shrink in your vision, you focus on subtle details in the remaining glow. You notice faint eddies of gas, tiny knots still glowing softly, the ghostly outlines of pillars that once seemed immense. You let your eyes follow every contour, every curl and filament, remembering the intricate patterns you explored in close detail. You sense the immense distances between features, the slow, deliberate motion of matter, and the quiet sculpting by radiation, gravity, and stellar winds. The nebula recedes, becoming part of the broader galactic canvas, yet its beauty remains subtle and enduring in your awareness. You drift further, leaving the nebula behind entirely. The galactic background fills your view. Swirls of distant stars, faint clouds of interstellar matter, and the soft glow of diffuse light from massive stellar populations. You guide your eyes along these structures, noticing subtle gradients of color and brightness. Light scatters gently across your perception, blending diffuse golds, pale blues, and soft whites. You feel a calm sense of scale, a quiet understanding that the nebula is one component in a vast, interconnected galaxy, part of the immense order of space. Fainter background galaxies become visible at the edges of your vision. Tiny spirals, ellipses, and irregular forms drift slowly, faint and distant. You follow their shapes gently, tracing faint arms of young stars, glowing cores, and soft halos. You sense the immense distances involved, the quiet drift of matter over millions of years, and the slow motion of cosmic structures. You let your eyes wander, absorbing the vast scale and serene rhythm of the universe. Each galaxy, each star cluster, each faint cloud is a testament to the quiet, patient processes shaping the cosmos. Finally, you allow your perception to expand, taking in the nebula now fully behind you, the surrounding stars, the faint galactic background, and distant galaxies. Light, motion, and structure fill your senses. You feel the textures of gas and dust, the subtle pushes of radiation and stellar winds, the gentle rotation of clusters, and the immense scale of space around you. You drift slowly, suspended in the quiet expanse, letting the colors, the glows, and the faint motions wash over your awareness. You feel weightless, calm, and fully immersed, floating in the vast, structured beauty of the galaxy, carrying the memory of the nebula and all its intricate forms in your mind. You breathe in the quiet majesty, the patterns of light and shadow, the delicate interplay of matter and energy. You feel present in this enormous, intricate universe, sensing both its immense scale and the intimate details you have explored. You allow yourself to float freely, letting the last hints of the nebula fade completely, leaving you surrounded by a quiet sea of stars. Light scatters across your vision, soft and gentle, tracing the curves of distant clusters and faint dust clouds. You sense the vastness of space, the slow, patient motion of cosmic forces, and the beauty of structures formed over millions of years. Your awareness embraces the calm, the colors, the faint warmth of stellar radiation, and the delicate motion of matter in its gentle, unhurried rhythm. You drift without effort, fully present, absorbing the scale, color, motion, and harmony of the cosmos. Every point of light, every subtle glow, every faint shadow in the galactic background carries meaning. You feel the nebula, its stars, its filaments, and its pillars, all integrated into the broader structure of the galaxy. You sense the quiet rhythm, the immense distances, the slow unfolding of matter and energy across light years. You are both observer and participant, fully immersed in the stillness and the subtle movement of the universe around you. The colors fade gently as your perception drifts farther from the nebula, soft pinks, pale blues, and gentle greens blending into the dark expanse. Light from distant stars forms a quiet, soft backdrop. You feel the immense calm of space, the gentle sweep of motion over vast distances, the subtle texture of interstellar matter, and the quiet harmony of gravitational forces. Your senses remain engaged, tracing the paths of light and shadow, feeling the ebb and flow of cosmic structures, and absorbing the beauty and scale of what surrounds you. You allow yourself to drift slowly, calmly, weightless and serene. The nebula is behind you. The stars stretch infinitely around you, and the galaxy spreads out in vast, delicate structures. You feel the interplay of light and matter, the gentle motion of gas, dust and stars, and the immense distances that give space its quiet majesty. Your awareness floats with the universe, tracing soft gradients of color, subtle motion of clouds and clusters, and the gentle glow of distant galaxies. Every detail remains vivid, every curve, filament and cavity remembered as you drift further into the calm expanse. Finally, you close your focus on all individual details, letting your awareness embrace the full scale. The nebula is now part of the cosmic background, the stars, clusters, and galaxies stretching endlessly around you. You feel the calm, the stillness, the beauty, and the vastness of space. Light, color, motion, and structure fill your senses in quiet harmony. You are suspended in space, weightless, fully immersed in the gentle rhythm and immense scale of the galaxy. You breathe slowly, letting the textures of light, matter, and energy settle in your awareness, feeling entirely present in the infinite expanse, floating calmly through the universe.